Good afternoon, guys. We are finally on the sine function. So these notes go with Tight Learning Days 26 and 27. I suggest going through these a couple times and hopefully they'll make sense. I tried to write out all the little details about the properties of sine functions that we usually talk about in class, and hopefully I haven't left anything out. But like always, send me a message on Remind and ask me what's going on, and I'll try to clear it up one-on-one. Okay, so let's start with just the overall generic formula. So when we have a sine function, the overall formula is going to be y equals a sine b theta. And a is not equal to 0. B is going to be positive. B is going to be greater than 0 when we use it. And theta is going to be in radians. All right, over here, I made a note. Remember that B is restricted to positive values because that's important. You can't have a negative number of cycles or a negative period. So that's why these are always going to be positive. All right, the absolute value of A is the amplitude of a function. So that's going to give me the height, either way, of a sine function. So let me get through all this and then kind of show you the graphs here, take it all in, and we'll see where our questions are. All right, B is the number of cycles in the interval from 0 to 2 pi. So number of cycles. 2 pi over B is the period of a function. Okay, you can use 5 points equally spaced through one. Oh, that's supposed to be a through. I think I wrote though. Let me correct it. Okay. Spaced through one cycle to sketch a sine curve. All right, so for A is greater than 0, so that means our amplitude is going to be positive. So the number here is positive. The pattern is going to be, it goes through the origin at 0, then max, 0, min, 0, if I'm starting from the origin. If it is less than 0, so if A is like -9, the pattern is 0, min, 0, max, 0. So it's just the flip with the max and the mins. So you can figure out the number of cycles B within your interval from 0 to 2 pi. So let's look at that. We're going to figure out the number of cycles B within your interval from 0 to 2 pi. So let's say there's just one cycle. Then you would divide the distance from 0 to 2 pi, because that's what the cycle always starts out being, 0 to 2 pi. You would divide the distance from 0 to 2 pi into 5 equal pieces. All right, the way to do that, the easiest way I've found, is you're going to divide 0 to 2 pi in half. That's going to give you pi. Then from 0 to pi, you're going to divide that in half, which is going to give you pi over 2. And then from pi over 2 pi, you're going to divide that in half, which is going to give you 3 pi over 2. So it would be 0, max, 0, min, 0. And that's what the sine wave looks like. Now, if there were 2 cycles, let's say B equals 2, then you would divide the distance from 0 to 2 pi in half, because you're going to have one cycle here and you're going to have a second cycle here, okay? So just choosing the 0 to pi, which would be my first cycle, which means I will be going 0 max, 0 min, 0 once here, and I will do it again here, okay? So just taking this first section, I'm going to take from 0 to pi, and I'm going to divide that in half, and I'm going to get pi over 2. Then I'm going to take 0 to 2 pi and 0 to pi over 2, divide that in half. That'll give me pi over 4. Then I'll take pi over 2 to pi and divide that in half, and that'll give me 3 pi over 4. So 0 here, max, 0, min, 0. All right, one cycle has the repetition of this 0 max, 0 min, 0. Or if A is negative, it's 0 min, 0 max, 0. So you just have to figure out your A. The period of a function is the horizontal length of one complete cycle. So the period here would be pi, because that's the length of that entire cycle. All right, let's look at a couple examples. What if I want you to sketch a graph? So what is the graph of one cycle with amplitude 2, period 4 pi, midline y equals 0, and A is greater than 0? Then I want you to use our generic form and write an equation for that sine curve. Alrighty. So since it tells me that the period is 4 pi, I'm going to have to divide 4 pi into 5 equal pieces. There are other ways to do this. If you like to do it differently, just do it differently. But just being consistent, we're going to go 0 to 4 pi, cut that in half, we'll get you 2 pi. Split that in half will get you pi, and then 2 pi to 4 pi, split that in half, that'll get you 3 pi. So those are my 5 equal points. My a is greater than 0, so I'm going to have 0 max, 0 min, 0. Okay? And I can go ahead and graph that here. The midline is, again, y equals 0, which is here. That's the x-axis. So we know that that's the halfway point between the max and the min. We learned that in, I think, 12-2. So you should already have notes on that. Okay, so let's write our generic function. Y equals a sine b theta. A is the amplitude, which they already told us was 2. So it's going up to 2, and it's going down to -2, and we can fill that in if we'd like. All right. So we know by this pattern that 2 is going to be positive. So 2 pi over b is the period. They gave us the period as 4 pi. So 2 pi over b equals 4 pi. And when you solve for b is 1/2. So now in my generic formula, I can fill in the a with 2. I can fill in the b with 1/2. And that would be the equation for the sine curve. Again, watch the video over this a couple times, because once you understand sine very well, then cosine will be a lot easier. Okay, let's look at one more example. And this one is graphing from a function rule. So I know what the function rule is. The graph is going to be y equals 1/2 sine 2 theta. So right away you say amplitude is the absolute value of a. A is positive, so I know the pattern is going to be 0 max, 0 min, 0. I also know that it's going to go up to 1/2 and down to -1/2. Okay, that much I know. What else can I figure out? Well, b is 2. So the period is 2 pi over b, and that's going to be equal to filling in the b, 2 pi over 2. So that's going to be pi. So it's going to tell me that one complete cycle is done from 0 to pi. So let's break it up into 5 pieces. I'm going to divide from 0 to pi in half. That's going to give me pi over 2. Dividing 0 to pi over 2 in half, that's going to give me pi over 4. Dividing pi over 2 to pi in half, that's going to give me 3 pi over 4. Okay, that's going to give me my 5 equal points. You can also think of it down here, fractions aren't your forte. This is 0, pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, and 4 pi over 4. So you've got 5 equal pieces. This is when the fractions are reduced. This is with common denominators. So that might help you see why it's 5 equal pieces. Once I know this, I'm just going to plot my points, graph my function, and I'm done. All right, again, if you have questions, ask me on Remind, or you can ask me on Google Classroom. If you guys feel like we need to meet and do some graphing live, that's another option. So try the Titan Learning days and see how the homework problems go, and let me know if you need help.